Hey there, you would be able to easily guess the genre of the movie when you come across the big star list of actors who lead this movie. Yes, you heard that right. We have James Franco, Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, Jay Baruchel, Danny McBride, Craig Robinson, Emma Watson, and maybe a dozen cameos to appear, and guess what? They hilariously represent the unflattering themselves. The movie kicks off with Seth Rogen waiting for Jay, his childhood friend, to spend the weekend together in his place. Once they find each other, they get in the car and talk about what's going on in each other's life. Jay asks for a nice burger joint to have some food. Seth hilariously refuses since he says he quit junk food since it is bad for health and everyone should totally avoid it, and so does he. Jay, who is startled by the response, he asks if he quit smoking weed and drinking alcohol. Seth replies with a no, and it's going on without any delay whatsoever, and tells he only quit food which contained gluten in it. Jay follows up with some hilarious facts about protein and proving how dumb Seth was deciding to quit foods with gluten in it. Next we get to see them munch down on burgers. They reach Seth's place, and Jay is surprised on how good his place is, and Seth gives a build up to what he had arranged for Jay in the living room. And for his surprise, he sees a well-decorated table with different varieties of weed and drugs, and that excites both of them. They continue to smoke most of the weed and watch Seth's new 3D TV, and as time passes by, Jay decides to take a break. This time, if we pay attention for a moment, we get to see a brief display of news of a strange sinkhole in Guatemala. They ignore it, and Seth talks about James Franco's new house party that night and how he'd like Jay to accompany him. But Jay refuses since he's not familiar with James Franco, and he don't think he knows him. Seth tells Jonah Hill is going to be there, and Jonah is absolutely super fond of Jay. But Jay responds with no interest at all. But since Seth is excited for this party, Jay decides to go for it, after Seth promises him to not ghost him during the party. We see this duo in front of James' house and surprised how good his place is, and as they get to the front door, James greets Seth with great happiness and hugs him. James proceeds to say how much attention he has put into his house to make it as artistic as possible. To which Jay responds he has no idea about art. James responds to this by pointing out how his birth is even an art. Then we get to see Mindy Kaling approaching them and greets Jay by appreciating how good he was on $1 Million Baby. Jay was happy to notice someone genuinely happy to see him there. Jonah approaches them and hugs Jay as soon as he sees him as if he missed him, but Jay refuses to converse further and leaves. Then we see a storekeeper woman being really rude to a person when he asks to use the bathroom for his daughter. Seth notices and let Jay know about this and asks him to build a chocolate bar he took since he is uncomfortable around people who are mean. Suddenly we see the whole store collapse as there occurs a sudden earthquake. People in the store start to rush and racks fall over Seth. As Jay looks around, he gets absolutely mind blown by the random blue beams of light that cast on a few people present in the store. After getting up, we see Seth and Jay escaping the store on panic, and as cars run past them uncontrollably, they have a hard time evading the chaos. They reach James' place and to their surprise, nothing has actually happened to his place and everybody looks fine. But as Seth tells about the weird earthquake, we see James jokingly say how strong his place is and nothing can disrupt the mood of the place. But Jay told about the strange blue light beams that sucked people out of the atmosphere, to which even Seth was surprised, as if Jay was high and spoke nonsense, and the crowd laughs. After a few moments we see the place trembling to a small shockwave as everybody gets panicked. James tells everybody to calm down and continue enjoying the party. But the place starts to continue tremble to the next shockwave that followed, and the crowd goes ballistic and runs towards the exit to absolutely get mind blown by the devastated Hollywood Hills. Then a massive sinkhole occurs right in front of the house to which most of the cameos fall into, like Rihanna, Kevin Hart, etc. We see James Franco dragging Seth to safety to his house, and Jay struggles but escapes the hole without falling in and runs towards James' house, where Craig and Jonah are already inside panicking. The gang proceeds to check the news on TV and finds how severe the earthquake is, and suddenly the signal cuts off. Since there are many people who take advantage of this situation to steal stuff of people's places, Craig proceeds to tear down a painting off James' wall, to which they argue, and as they argue, an uncontrolled helicopter crashes into his place and debris falls inside. The gang starts to panic and starts to seal every opening with whatever they could find. Then we see them collecting everything they have with them, that include consumables, drugs, a camcorder and a prop gun that James used in one of his films. After that, Jay tells how they should split everything in fives since they don't know how long these will last, and they all agree and proceed to go to sleep. We see Seth joining Jay in bed since he is frightened. After a while, Jay tells him how similar the situation is to Judgmental Day and how he thinks this might be it. But Seth disagrees. Next day we see a brief shot of Danny, who didn't see anything that happened last night at all since he got high and passed out. Ignorant of the limited food and water supply, he absolutely wastes most of it and prepares breakfast. James gets down to the kitchen to get shocked and screams on how he just wasted most of the food items, to which Danny responds ignorant and thinks they are acting. Soon we see someone outside the door trying to get inside the house for safety, but, as the gang argue on if they should let him in, something chops the person's head off that rolls towards the gang, and they get really frightened and panics on not knowing what to do. Then we see the gang gathered over the dining table to discuss the situation. Jay starts to put forward his theory on how this is Judgmental Day and starts reading Bible verses to prove his point. Next we see Craig slicing a piece of cheese into 6 pieces. James hands over some crackers to Seth in secret and let him know about his secret stash of food items and how they need to keep this a secret. To let the time pass, the gang starts to consume the remaining supply of drugs and weed and starts doing weird stuff like shooting a sequel to one of their movies on James' camcorder from the movie 127 Hours. Later that day, we see Emma Watson breaking the front door and entering in, to which both her and the gang are surprised to see them survive. Emma proceeds to let them know how she survived on an abandoned drainpipe and is absolutely swamped. James directs her to use the room upstairs to take some rest. Then we see Jay address the situation of how odd there are 6 men and 1 woman, and how they should behave properly to maintain a decent environment. But soon the conversation turns into an absolute disaster when Danny points out Jay is talking about them gang raping Emma. She eavesdrops to this conversation and gets defensive and proceeds to grab hold of a big axe and confronts the gang. She asks them to leave her alone and to hand over every drinks they have left. When they hands over the bag filled with bottles, she leaves. As they are out of water supply, the gang decides to fetch the remaining 2 water cans in the basement, where they can only enter from outside the house, but since it is crazy outside, they decide to test their chances by playing a game using matchsticks to select the person leaving the house. As it turns out, Craig was the one who was selected. He prepares to leave the house by tying a rope around his waist and instructing the rest of the gang to pull him inside if something bad happens. As he reaches the basement door, he finds it impossible to open it and finds himself frightened to hell in front of a creature. He escapes it and enters the house. After they realizes how difficult and frightening it is to leave the place, James tells them about how it is just right beneath them where they are standing. Then they get the idea to dig the floor towards the basement. Next we see Craig and Jay conversing on how Jay is right about his theory on the situation, but Jay tells Craig that it is okay and they still have time to redeem themselves to their way to heaven. After a while, Jay gets down to Seth to help with digging the floor, and after some time the floor just crack opens, and the gang finds the remaining cans of water. They pour themselves a small wine glass full of water, and as they are savoring it, Danny proceeds to pour another glass of water, to which the rest of the gang gets offended and starts to confront him about how it is not fair for him to break the rule of dividing everything equally. Danny gets angry with this and starts to waste the whole water can by pouring it all over his body. The gang calms down Danny and they get him out of there. Soon James tells the rest of the gang on how unfair and ridiculous Danny is, and they should get rid of him. Later they let Danny know about their decision. He starts to get emotional and proceeds to leave, but as he leaves, James hands over his prop gun to him for his safety. But as he gets the gun, Danny starts to shoot everyone, but since it is just a prop gun, no one's hurt. Danny feels backstabbed and rants on how he hates being there and he is leaving whatsoever. Before leaving, Danny tells Seth about Jay being a hypocrite, as Jay tells everybody about how he hates this place. Still, he frequently comes this town and still haven't visited Seth, and he even asked Danny to not tell Seth about this. After saying this, he leaves. Seth gets disappointed upon hearing the truth. Jonah starts to tell Jay on how it was so bad of him to lie to his best friend. Annoyed and frustrated, Jay punches Jonah in his face. Next we see Jonah praying to God on how he hates Jay, and if anybody gets hurt, please let it be Jay. After he falls asleep, we see a huge black monster-like figure attacking Jonah in his sleep and possessing him. The next morning, we see the gang deciding on which person to leave the house to fetch things to survive. This time it turns out Seth has to leave, but he gets indecisive and starts to display his disagreement as he doesn't want to help others. Jay comes forward to leave, as someone must do it. Craig also joins him, since he finds Jay too weak to carry the supplies. both of them leave the house, and as they walk they find a house. Meanwhile we see Seth being sad on how he handled the situation and worried about them. Suddenly we hear Jonah screaming out loud and passing out on the floor downstairs. As James and Seth finds him, Jonah acts all weird, as he was possessed by the Satan last night, and starts to say they all are going to die and attacks them. As they get attacked, back in the new place Jay and Craig starts to stash in as many food supplies they could find. Jay tells him how nice it would be for them to stay there without going back, but Craig disagrees to leave his friends behind. As they discuss, a giant creature jumps in through the window and attacks them left and right. As they try to escape this, we see Jonah starting to puke black goo all over Seth and James and attacking them back in James' house. Craig and Jay struggles to escape and somehow reach James' place to find them covered in black goo. As Seth inquires why were they running in, Craig tells about the creature and how it attacked them, and Craig asks the same thing to Seth, to whom they reply on how Jonah is possessed by Satan. As Jonah comes to attack them, Jay hits Jonah's head with a baseball bat, which results in Jonah passing out. They immediately tie Jonah onto a bed. After a while they all come to realize about the truth about Jay's theory, and they are worried about how God left them to die, even though they are nice people. But soon Craig confesses about him once poking someone's eyes, leaving that person blind, which was followed by James' confession on how he once had sexual intercourse with another actress, falsely convincing her on him being Jake Gyllenhaal. A sudden power cut occurs, and they hear tied up, Satan-possessed Jonah screaming. They light up candles and gather around Jonah's bed, and Jay starts to perform exorcism by repeating after lines from the movie The Exorcist. After a while, as the chants become effective, the bed starts to levitate, which leads to Seth getting defensive and stopping Jay, which in return results in them fighting. Meanwhile, a candle rolls over the floor and lights up a fire, which led to Jonah catching fire and eventually dying. As the place gets burned down, the remaining gang somehow escapes the fire and gets outside. As they plan to escape using James' car, we see a giant monster creature landing on top of the car porch. Craig proposes an idea of distracting it so that the rest of them could escape safely. As he proceeds to distract its attention, James, Seth, and Jay enters the car and starts escaping. As soon as the monster attacks Craig, a blue light beam, same as before, sucks Craig to heaven through a portal and saves him. This helps them notice how being nice to people could help them still get to heaven. Hence James tells them that they could drive to his place in Malibu and they could spend the rest of days being nice until they are saved. But suddenly the car gets ambushed by a group of people, making them exit the car. As they get ambushed, it's revealed that Danny is their leader, and he became a cannibal, and is surprised to see his old friends. Danny tells how he and his group of cannibals are hungry, and they are going to kill and eat them. Shocked gang starts to defend themselves. James tells Jay and Seth to escape, while he diverts their attention to him. This helps Jay and Seth to escape. Meanwhile, as James sacrifices himself to save them, he also gets hit by the bright blue light beam and starts to get sucked into heaven. As he gets dragged towards the sky, he gets crazy and starts to cuss offensively, which in turn led the beam to turn off and leaving James down to die for real. As he falls down, the group of cannibals starts to munch down on James and kills him. As Jay and Seth run to safety, they witness a humongous monster resembling Satan. As Jay sees this, he confesses on how he treated Seth and his friends badly and how he felt really bad and egoistic on Seth's success in career, which made him jealous. As he confesses this, the bright blue beam of light starts to suck Jay off the ground towards heaven too. He grabs Seth's hand, but since Seth is too heavy, it slows both of them down. Realizing this, Seth tells how he doesn't deserve heaven and proceeds to leave Jay's hands to fall to death. As he falls into the demon's mouth to die, the blue beam of light appears and drags Seth to heaven too. This leads to the Satan demon getting killed. As Seth and Jay runs above the misty clouds of heaven, they see Craig waiting for them above, smiling. The film finishes off with a dance party where everybody is chilling in heaven. Hope you guys enjoyed this goofy fictional entertainer. If you did, let us know how you felt about it, and don't forget to comment down your thoughts. Until then, bye.